Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story about OP's landlord who tried to swindle them out of a deposit after they moved out. However, karma had other plans. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My landlord got not exactly what he deserved, but it sure was a rough ride for him. I had a landlord who was pretty absent. I lived in this building, a high-rise like 20 stories, for 10 plus years. He, despite living next door to me, was absent and cold personally, but cool enough. Rent was good. Our agreement was never bother him about anything unless it's an absolute emergency. Shower head wonky, go buy a new one. Fridge breaks, get it fixed, or dude, just buy a new one. Take it out of what you pay in rent. Lost the receipt? I don't care. I know more or less what a fridge costs. Just take it out of the rent. Finally, his wife decides she wants more rent, wants to rent the place out as an office, not legal, and wants us out ASAP. I agree to move out a month early and get a month's rent back plus deposit. Complete 180 on their part. The place is ruined. Can't give you crap until you fix all this stuff. Two main things. My cats did scratch up the leather legs of the dining table, and the pull-up bar made 2 dents in the door frame of the kitchen, which was quite nice hardwood. They come to me with this list of tons of stuff like, oh, you hang a photo frame here? This tile's slightly chipped? This is the busiest work time of year for me, but I'm trying to be cooperative. Sure, I got the table legs re-leathered, spackle the photo frame, wall hole, can't do anything about the door frame, take it out of the deposit, patch the tile like dozens of little everyday wear and tear things. Like you want me to change the window screens? These are all new screens and in nicer shape than when I moved in. But I did them all. I trusted the guy. Got to get my money. At the end, he should have been giving me 2,500 pounds. He gave me 500. I still need to use the money to fix all that stuff. If you can't accept the 5, I can't give you anything at all. I was super PO'd, but took the 500. Now, people in the building are gossipy. I don't participate, but I did tell this one older lady about my frustration. She told everyone. The wife went from being the star of the mommies group of the building to nobody wanting to talk to her. People shunned the guy too. I originally told them I was planning on moving to another city, but an opportunity came up and I ended up renting a similar unit in the same building, so they thought they could just screw me over and not have to see me. But now they still did, often. A year later, the office calls me with some question about how to do something with the floor heating. I go, door frame's not fixed, still has dents. I call the guy like, what the hell, man? And he tells me to mind my own business. 5 years later, I see the light at my old place is still on at 3 a.m. Oh, that's odd. I go to check, the door's open, and the place is just trash, ruined, cabinets broken, stuff on the walls, lazy landlord, and the dents on the kitchen door frame are still there. So the guy never fixed anything, just kept my money. By this time, smartphones were popular, and we had a chat group for the whole building, so about 500 people. I took pictures and posted everything. Apparently, he'd also nicked these people's deposit, and there was a huge ruckus when they trashed the place. Cops called. All these people chime in with complaints and pictures, people smoking in the hallways, leaving leaky rubbish outside the front door, videos of people using foul language in front of children, dirty footprints. He got fined a lot for 1, creating a public disturbance, 2, degrading the quality of the living space, 3, illegally renting a residence as an office, and to top it off, the building management wouldn't grant him permission to have workers in to fix the place, so it sat there empty for like 6 months. The fines were big, too. Take 1.5 months' rent from me, lose a year's rent. Suck it, bro. You are awesome for being so dedicated to taking the crappy landlord down. Good work. And our second story. Grandma Karen decides to unhook autistic child's harness. This happened several years ago. I was a photographer for a major theme park and have dealt with my fair share of entitled Karens, but there's only been one time I've had to call security because of a Karen. I was working with a character one afternoon, and one of the families that stopped by to pay a visit was this family of 3 with mom, dad, and a 5-year-old boy that I'll name Malcolm. Malcolm is strapped to a harness attached to mom's waist. Think those jogging harnesses for blind runners to keep him close to mom and dad. Before the session, Dad pulled the character attendant and me aside and alerted us that Malcolm was a nonverbal autistic and camera flashes were overstimulating to him. Now, this was a pretty common request, so I adjusted my settings so I wouldn't have to use the flash and thanked him for alerting me. It's Malcolm's turn, and he was such a sweetheart. He just wanted to show off the book full of pictures of his favorite dinosaurs, and we all got sad when he had to leave. A few hours later, I was in an area we refer to as backstage, where guests aren't allowed, heading to my break. Imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I get body slammed by Malcolm. For the record, I'm almost 6 feet and 250 pounds, and he nearly managed to knock me over. He's screaming and crying. Fortunately, my manager, Oscar, was nearby, so I flagged him down and we immediately called security. We get Malcolm to a cool, air-conditioned place as it's 95 Fahrenheit, and I look up pictures of dinosaurs on my phone to show Malcolm. Eventually, he calmed down and he essentially became my little buddy. About 10 minutes later, Malcolm's reunited with a tearful mom and dad. It's there we got the full story. Enter Karen. Mom, Dad, and Malcolm were getting ice cream when Karen approached. The conversation went roughly as followed. Karen, why is he harnessed? Mom, oh, he's autistic and he'll bolt if he's not harnessed. Karen, no, he's not. Mom, excuse me? Karen, you're just a bad parent. My grandson knows better than to stray from me, and he's about the same age. Mom, I'm sorry, but he's incapable of understanding that. It's safer for everyone if he's harnessed. It's at this point that Dad comes back with the ice cream and Mom turns her attention away to help him. The next thing she knows, the harness goes slack. When she looked up, Malcolm and Karen are gone. It's so packed that day that it's easy to lose track of someone, especially if it's a running child. An important thing to note is that the park has cameras everywhere, so it was easy to get a video of the incident and get a description of the Karen. Security was alerted and Karen tracked down. She was belligerent and tried to slap the security guard who stopped her, stupidly doing it in front of an OC sheriff. So she got a lovely court date for assault as a result. Malcolm and his family were given an extra day added to their tickets as an apology for what happened, but they just had one request. They asked to know where I would be the next day so I could take their pictures. The next day, I gave them a full-on photo shoot, and yes, it was the best day of my entire career. Such a great story, and such a great outcome. Well, of course, except for the poor guard who was slapped. And our last story. Our neighbor was constantly stealing our fuel and paid for it. Background. We've always had issues with our neighbor Greg and his family. They're the type that seem to thrive on causing problems for everyone around them. You know the type, loud, obnoxious, and always pulling some shady move. We dealt with enough over the years, but what happened next took things to a new level. Now on with the story. About 2 years ago, we noticed something odd. Our fuel tank was draining way faster than it should. We hardly used any gas, especially around that time of year, so it didn't make any sense. After keeping an eye on it for a few weeks, my dad did some investigating and made a shocking discovery. Somehow, a pipe had been installed that led from our fuel tank straight to Greg's side of the property. And here's the kicker. Greg had just gotten himself a brand new SUV, the kind of beast that guzzles gas. Not only was he siphoning small amounts over time, but there were massive drops in fuel usage every few days. He was likely filling up his car entirely with our fuel, saving himself a fortune while leaving us with the bill. Since going to the police wasn't an option, Greg's nephew's a cop, and you know how family connections work in small towns, my dad came up with a clever plan to get back at him. We waited until Greg went on vacation, which he did like clockwork every spring. While he was away, we disconnected our house from the fuel line. The idea was to prevent him from suspecting anything was off when he came back. We didn't want him catching on too soon. We just kept living normally, letting him think he was getting away with it. Once Greg returned, he resumed siphoning our fuel without hesitation. He must have thought he was a genius, pulling this off so easily. But we'd already figured out his schedule. Every 4 to 5 days, he'd drain the tank like clockwork to fill up his car. That's when we put the second part of the plan into action. The night before Greg's next refill, my dad prepared the ultimate payback. Instead of leaving regular petrol in the tank, we mixed in soap and water. The trick was to make sure it still looked like petrol, so we left just enough of the real stuff to color the mixture. For those who don't know, water in a gas tank is a nightmare. It can destroy the fuel system, engine, and other critical parts of the car. It's an expensive fix, and we knew Greg's flashy new SUV wouldn't survive it. The next morning, right on schedule, Greg filled up his tank with our special fuel. We watched from the window as he drove off, smug as ever, probably thinking he was getting another free ride. Little did he know his engine was on borrowed time. About 2 days later, we heard it. Greg's SUV stalled in his driveway, coughing and sputtering before drying completely. I could hear him cursing from our kitchen. "What the hell?" he shouted, slamming the door of his car. He popped the hood, but there was no saving it. The damage was done. Greg called a mechanic, and after some poking around, the verdict came back. The fuel system was completely shot. Water had corroded parts of the engine, and repairing it would cost a small fortune. It was so bad that Greg couldn't even justify fixing it. He had to sell the car for scrap. But the story doesn't end there. Greg had also been using the same fuel source to power his home's heating system. The water and soap mixture from our tank didn't just destroy his car, it also wreaked havoc on his boiler and heating system. Over time, the corrosion spread through his system, causing pipes to rust and leak. One morning, we woke up to loud banging next door. Greg was screaming at the top of his lungs. "What is this? How is there water everywhere?" The heating system had failed completely, and there was a flood in his basement. By the time a plumber arrived, there was significant water damage to the house. The repairs, plus the cost of replacing the entire heating system, must have cost him thousands. Greg never confronted us directly. I guess he suspected something, but knew he couldn't prove it. After all, he'd been the one stealing our fuel in the first place. Confronting us would have meant admitting to his own crime. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.